Hello, so I'm going to make a video talking through something to do with sociology, and it's actually um, well, it was devised by Talcott Parsons in the 1950s, I believe, and yeah, it's I don't know exactly what to call it. Like my teacher calls it the Gale schema, so I'll just call it that. I think you can call it AGIL schema as well, but it's just an acronym, so it's like 4 letters, and it's just however you want to order them, I guess. But the order does have some significance to the theory, to um, what it's trying to say, I guess. Okay, so the Gale schema stands for, the G is goal attainment, A is adaptation, I is integration, and L is latency. And these are the 4 things which every society needs. So they're called the functional prerequisites. The what every society needs in order to function properly or function at all. But the presence of all 4 of these prerequisites doesn't necessarily mean that a society will function, but a society can't function without them. So a society can fail with all these 4 functions being carried out, but it's not determined to succeed, if that makes any sense. Yeah, so I was thinking about this the other day, and I think it does make sense to say that because, well, I think the order that Parsons said was most universally prevalent was ILAG. So not ILGA, and that was the one that was most common. So that order, it's like, and the order matters because the first one leads to the second one, and the second one leads to the third one, and the third one leads to the fourth one, according to Parsons anyway. And so every society needs integration because, well, integration we can think of as integrating new members into a society. It's like teaching them the norms and the values and how things are run. And this is important because if we don't have integration, then we don't have the communal aspects, and we can't pass on the messages of a set social group, like a tribe, for example. And a good example of this is actually to think about a tribe. So if you think about we'll say, a tribe before the age of modern societies, whereby it was like a hunter-gatherer sort of age, the tribe would have a goal. So this would be linked to goal attainment. They would have to go out and gather food for their own survival. Without having the integration process in place, they wouldn't be able to teach the message of how to go out and gather food. And also we can argue that going and gathering food and hunting is a group activity. Therefore, it requires other social beings in order to be able to fulfill this function, which is necessary for survival. So without this function, then you wouldn't have humanity in the way that we are now known today. Like we could have evolved a different way, whereby we would be more individualistic. But then again, would we have evolved so much in being able to build houses and build factories and build like amazing sculptures and things like that? I don't know. Okay, so that's pretty much integration, and I've touched. Well, I guess we're going to talk a little bit more about integration. Integration also, I guess, it stops us all from killing each other. It holds us together like glue, and I feel like there's a strong link between integration and latency. See, at college we got taught that latency is letting off steam. So, for example, in a capitalist society, the place to let off steam is supposedly the family. So, and the family fulfills that function, the latent function. But the way that I understood latency beforehand, like I thought of latent functions, which is something I did last year in sociology, and it's the idea of fulfilling an unintended consequence. So, for example, in the education system, you might go to school. The intended purpose of the education system, set by the government or whoever sets the purpose of these institutions, is to get an education. It's to learn. It's to so you can one day perhaps go and get a job. But along with that, there's also a social function. So it's like you go to school and you might make friends and I guess integrate with or interact with other people. Therefore, it's filling another function, and this is the latent function. It's an unintended consequence. And I don't really understand what Parsons meant by the Gale schema, because I've got different definitions of the word which seem to imply different things. But there was actually, in brackets, when I was reading about it the other day, there was something written after it, and I can't quite remember what it was, but it was, I don't know, but I feel like it inferred transmission of values. That's pretty much what it meant. And yeah, so I think religion was an example of it. So I guess you could argue that religion fulfills the latent function in the same way that it does in a family, that it lets people let off steam, because it can act as a comforting sort of thing which keeps people functioning in the world. But it also religion is also an axiomatic foundation, I guess. It provides a set shared value for a culture to abide by, and this prevents cultural fragmentation, which is sort of what's happened with postmodernism. So I guess then you'd have to question, why is that important? But that's why I closely link latency with integration, because they seem to be interconnected in quite a big way. And I know that they're all interconnected, but I don't really see much distinction between them, because latency seems to fulfill the role of integration. If everyone's sharing the same norms and values, then a society is together. It's integrated. You can be integrated into society if you have the same norms and values as everyone else. And obviously there's other factors at play, but I think it does boil down to norms and values. Like, for example, if you go into a specific society and you have a value that it is okay to murder, but that whole society doesn't hold that value, yet you go out and murder, then you're going to be alienated by that society and most likely punished by whatever criminal justice system they may have. So I think there is a big link between those two things, and goal attainment and adaptation, they're slightly, I'd put them as slightly different. But then again, I think you could link adaptation in with that as well, because let's say you do have different values to the mainstream of society. That differentiation in the values that you hold could cause you to become alienated, like I've just said with the example of you thinking it's okay to murder. And that's a quite extreme example, because not a lot of people do think that. But the ability for you to adapt and change your values allows you to become integrated into that society. So I guess that's one example for adaptation, but I think there's another example for adaptation, and I'll go back to the hunter-gatherer example that I used earlier. So, like, we'll assume that you're in a tribe and you're hunting on a specific piece of land. You're managing to find food and it's all fine until one day, let's say there's a drought. All the animals, they might migrate to somewhere else, so the animals, I guess, fulfilling their own adaptive function, but I'll leave that aside because I don't think Parsons intended this to be about animals. I think it was solely a human thing. But yeah, so there's a drought, so there's very little water, very little food can grow. All the animals which you would have otherwise used as food if there wasn't any berries or organic food growing, you would kill the animals. But because now there's no animals, there's no berries, there's no water, you have to have, your society or tribe has to have the ability to be able to adapt. And that might mean, okay, picking up and leaving, going somewhere else where there is food and where there is water and where your tribe can survive. So if you didn't have the ability to be able to adapt, then you wouldn't be able to survive. The tribe would just die out, and obviously, so that suggests that adaptation is a functional prerequisite. That Parsons is right in what he was saying about that. I can't picture a society without the ability to adapt, and I'm sure there's a lot more examples of it than that. But I think I've give two, like the ability to adapt your own values so that you can be integrated into a society, but also the ability to adapt your behaviour so that you can survive. And I know that that's not much of a big issue in a modern society where we have pretty much everything we need in supermarkets, but yeah, you can see how it's still important. Okay, so what was the last one? Goal attainment. So goal attainment's important also, and I'm going to use the same example again of the hunter-gatherer, even though it's not exactly applicable to modern day society. I think it's a good example. Right. So goal attainment. If you didn't have the ability to have goals or want to attain goals, then you wouldn't even be able to plan to go out and do things, because you'd be doing everything. I don't know, nothing would have meaning, would it? So you can think of the fact that you need to go out and get food as a goal. See, that's an essential goal. You need to go out and get food. If you didn't have the ability to do that, then you wouldn't be able to go out and get food. Like, you might be able to act, but I can't see how you'd have any sort of meaningful action, because meaningful action is defined by a goal or determined by a goal. If you don't have anywhere you're trying to get to, if you don't have any perception of the future, then are you not just acting instinctually? And I think here is sort of like where the lines get blurry, because do animals have goal attainment? And again, I know that I don't think Parsons did apply this to animals, but I think it's a good question to ask, because we were once animals. So at what point did these functions come into play? At what point did we realise them? And I'm assuming it was the point that we realised that there is a future. It's like we realised that there is time, and that we're moving through it, and we're not just in the moment that we're in now, experiencing things as they seem to be right now. So like, we get hungry, we go get food. It's different to that now, and it's been different for probably thousands of years. I don't know the exact time span there, but yeah. So animals probably, like, I'm assuming animals get hungry and then they somehow decide that they're going to get food, that they want food, and I don't quite know if that's the same as goal attainment, but I guess it sort of is, but on a much lower level than what we have. For example, we can set ourselves goals such as going to university or getting a really good job, or like we seem to be able to broaden our horizons a little bit more than animals can. Like, you don't see chimps going to school and getting an education, or reading a book, or doing things which require a little bit more thinking, a little bit more education. So, but anyway, that's a little bit off the point. Goal attainment is an essential part to survival, because without it, we wouldn't be able to conceive of the future, or we would be able to conceive of the future, but we wouldn't be able to make any sort of plan to do things. But I feel like it is. I think I'm getting stuck a little bit on the language here, of what exactly goal attainment means. But I'll assume it does mean that it's just planning to do something and to achieve something in the future. So that could be to set out to go and buy food, or set out in a tribal sort of place to set out and go and hunt for food, to get the food, to eat the food. And those are all based on goals, and the goals which may differentiate in value, but they're all, I guess, different forms of goal attainment that seem essential to the human experience. Yeah, when I was talking about animals a minute ago, I remembered this guy called Mead, who was also a sociologist, and I think he was sort of linked to this, but not really. But he just said that animals are different to humans because humans have the ability to um think and reason. But he said something else that I can't remember, and it's a little bit off topic anyway, so I probably won't start talking about that now. But anyway, that's Parsons Gale schema or AGIL schema or whatever you want to call it. So I think I'll leave it at that. But there was actually another thing. Um, okay, I can take this a little bit further actually. Um, Parsons said that the Gale schema was. It's not that social institutions act out the Gale schema. Oh, wait, it's not that the Gale schema exists within social institutions. It's that it exists at a much higher level. It's sort of metaphysical, but it's still real in a lot of ways in that it is necessary. It's that social institutions act out the Gale schema, so that the Gale schema is necessary for different social institutions to be able to function. So one example I was thinking of the other day was businesses. Businesses need the ability to adapt, especially with the fast changing, well, the speed at which society is changing in 2018, with technological advancements. So businesses need to be able to adapt to that changing climate, I guess. They also need to be able to have the ability to integrate. So I guess that could be the business itself being able to integrate into society, so that I guess this would be fulfilled. I guess this would be carried out by the function of selling products which are some sort of demand in society. So there's no point in them selling something that no one's going to want to buy, because then they're not integrated in society. And I can't think of anything off the top of my head that people wouldn't want to buy. But I'll say like dog shit. No one in the right mind is going to want to support a business that just sells dog shit, because well, why would you want to do that? It's not going to be integrated into society. And then what else does a business need to do? The lesson function, I'm going to assume that this one is sort of sharing the same values as each other. So everyone in the business must be well, they must all have some sort of shared value in order for the business to function. Otherwise, I guess there would be the possibility of it breaking out into chaos, and then the business would then inevitably break down. And those values also have to be passed down to the new employees who will also be joining the business, and they will be the ones who keep the business running when the other employees grow old and die, and then the same. When this will go on and on until the business does eventually and probably inevitably fail. So the business also needs goal attainment. So goal attainment we can think of as making new product. Where does the business want to get to? Because I guess if you don't have that goal attainment, then what are you working towards? Like, you could start a business, and that in itself is a goal. So it's like, okay, I'm going to start a business. And then it goes further than that. Once you've started the business, what do you want the business to become? And that allows the business to grow. And I guess your main goal could be to make profit. But under that big main goal of profiting, you have to have mini goals. It's like, well, what products do you want to make? And then you set out to make mobile phones. You set out to make socks, you set out to make clothes, and all of those are different goals of which you have to fulfill in order for the business to function. And again, we can link back to adaptation. When the demands of society change, then you have to set goals to make different products which are going to sell more and make you more profit as a business owner. So the institutions of society act under the Gale schema, which is essentially a metaphysical idea in that you can't see adaptation as a concept, but it is something that exists, and it is something that has to be acted out by different social institutions. So the action of adaptation is real, and the action of integration is real, but the actual concept is separate from being real. It exists outside of just the material world. So it exists outside the world of actuality, but it's more of like an idea or an ideal. Perhaps that would be the best way to think of it. Okay, I think there was one more example, but I don't think Parsons actually created this example, but I just remember reading it somewhere. And it was something like, you can think of it like a video game. So with a video game, you have the program. The program could be the Gale schema, for example. So these are the four functional prerequisites of a video game. This is metaphorical, obviously. I'm assuming that the four functional prerequisites won't be the same software which makes the game work. But anyway, so you've got that, but then within the video game, you also have the ability to make individual choices. So it requires that acting out of a certain thing to be able to... Wait, I think I've got this confused a little bit. Okay, so there's the software, but there's also the player, and this is where free will comes in. The player isn't forced to play the game in a set way. The player is forced to play the game in the confines of the rules of that game, so that they can make their own decisions within the confines of those rules. And depending on how strict the rules are of the game, or how lenient, depends on how many free choices the player can make within that specific game. And this is sort of like the Gale schema. The Gale schema is the rules of the game, essentially. It's like the board. We'll say it's like the chessboard. You can only do what the different pieces are allowed to do, according to the rules, and you can't necessarily exit the board, but you can do a lot of different things on that board. So linking back to the Gale schema, you have to play within the context of that. You have to play by the rules of the Gale schema, so you can't have a society without the Gale schema, as I've explained already. But you can act in a lot of different ways under that Gale schema. So you're not necessarily set on a set path. You can act in multiple different ways under that schema, and I think I've probably not explained that to the best, in the best possible way. But anyway, this is a long video, so I'm gonna quit out there, I think. Yeah, right, thanks for watching.